Hey everyone, and welcome to my best books of 2021 video. So we are now in January 2022, so it's time to share with you my favourite books of 2021. So let's just get right into it because the list is quite long. This is not in any particular order whatsoever. What I'm going to do is tell you the books, then the graphic novels, just because that's going to be the easiest thing to do. And if you're not interested in graphic novels, you can just skip that bit. Or if you're not interested in books, you can skip to the graphic novels. I'll put a timestamp here so you can check it out. But with that, let's get into my first book. First novel I'm going to mention is Mysterious Travel for Monstrous Gentlewomen by Theodora Goss. This is the second book in the Athena Club series. That's what it's called. And this one is sort of like a retelling of a whole load of gothic characters. So you've got like a female version of Frankenstein, you've got the daughters of Jekyll and Hyde, people like this. They're all female, and it's sort of like about how these people all come together to try and protect more people like them and trying to stop these terrible experiments during the Victorian era, with Sherlock Holmes and John Watson along for the ride. And I love this book. I love this series. This series is one of my favourites, even though it took me like 2 years to get to this book. I still love it, quite frankly. I think it is absolutely genius. I love how feminist it is. I love how all of these characters feel so real and there is no girl hate. Yes, there is bickering, but it's more like sisterly bickering in that way. So I really enjoy that, and I love the world building of it. I love how it's slightly macabre in its way, and it tackles some quite important topics and things like this, and I just generally absolutely love it, and I cannot recommend it enough to basically everybody. Second book I'm going to mention is the only other Kindle book before I get into the physical books, then the comics, and then there are a couple of Kindle comics, but we'll get to that in a minute. And that is Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. This book blew me away. Quite frankly, I was really worried about going into this one because I had heard that it was sort of quite flowery in its writing and things like this, but it really worked for me. I loved, again, the sisterly bond these characters had. I loved how there was no girl hate. Again, yes, the characters were constantly arguing with each other, but they had good reasons for it, and each of their grievances with each other really felt real in that sense, and it wasn't like just there for the sake of it. It was very much part of their story, and it all informed their storyline. I loved how this whole story was basically putting the middle finger up to the patriarchy as well. I loved how the magic system worked and how it was very much like woven into stories and things like this. I thought it was genius, quite frankly. It was absolutely incredible, and now I want to read everything Alex E. Harrow has ever written because this was perfection. And then onto the physical books. The first one I have to mention is Legend Born by Tracy Deonn, because of course this couldn't be a best books of 2021 list without this book, because this was one of the first books I read of the year and I absolutely adored it, quite frankly. This is about Bree, who is grieving her mother, and she ends up going away to a sort of starter college kind of thing, which is sort of like her finishing off high school while in a college setting. There she meets several people, and it turns out that they are part of a secret society who are the descendants of King Arthur and the Round Table, and what they are doing is protecting humanity from various monsters, and it all goes from there. Essentially, this has some beautiful magic in here. I love the plot twists. I love like the characters as well. Yes, there is setting up to be a bit of a love triangle, but somehow I don't really care, which is saying something because I am not here for love triangles in books. They are usually an auto DNF for me, or at least I get very nervous about them, and generally I end up hating the book by the end of it. But this one worked really well. I love the differing magic systems and talking about like ancestry and things like this. I loved as well just how it all worked and how it all unfolded. The only thing is that I wish there had been some sort of map at the back of all the family trees, because I was very confused by the family trees and the hierarchy in this society. Everything else was brilliant. It was just that bit that was a bit like, wait, what? And I was very confused for that, but everything else was absolutely genius, and I am so excited for the next book to come out this July, if I remember rightly. Yeah, I think it's like July, so I cannot wait. I'm so excited to continue this series. I'm then also going to mention Skullduggery Pleasant, because 2021 was quite frankly made by the Dead Famous Read Along, which is a read along that I am co-hosting, where we're reading one Skullduggery Pleasant book a month up until the final book comes out this year, which I'm not looking forward to because I've been reading this series since I was 11 and I'm not ready for it to end, quite frankly. But I've got to put this on here because this is my favourite series of all time. I absolutely adore it. I adore Derek Landy, and his writing, this series is so special to me, and all the live streams and everything else have been absolutely incredible. I have loved every single minute of them, and it's just been a great time reading these all over again, and then finally continuing on with the series, because I usually get to book 9, Dead or Alive, and then stop and generally end up restarting again. So it's been nice to finally have the motivation to continue the series instead of just reading the same 9. I'm also saying Not Even Bones by Rebecca Schaefer, and this one is what I call Wednesday Addams in a book, because this one is sort of set in our world, but monsters exist and everyone knows about it essentially, and the main character in this, who is Nita, is also one of these monsters. So is her mother, but they are sort of under the radar, and what her mother does is hunt down these monsters, gets her daughter to dissect them, and then they sell the bits on the black market. And this book follows what happens when Nita ends up being trapped in this black market to be sold, essentially. And it is dark, it is bloody, it is gory, it was everything I wanted, quite frankly. It was brilliant. If you like dark fantasy books that are also slightly contemporary, read this, because this was fantastic and I am all over it. I cannot wait to read the next one. It's one of the priority books for the year. So, I love this. It made my Wednesday Addams heart cry with joy. That's the only way I can describe it. My Wednesday Addams heart cried with joy reading this. Next one I'm going to mention is Slay by Brittany Morris. This one has been described as Black Panther meets Ready Player One, in the sense that you've got this sort of thing like the Oasis from Ready Player One, but it's made specifically for black people by a black person, aka the main character, Kira. I just had to look that up. I haven't read this since February. And this book focuses on Kira after someone has been killed in real life because of the game she created, and all of the consequences of that, and the world finding out about Slay. And I loved this. This was absolutely brilliant. I read it in a day. I don't read contemporaries and I don't read books in a day, and this just blew me away. So I read it in like 8 hours, in like one sitting. I literally stopped to eat lunch, and that was the only time I stopped while reading this, because this was amazing, quite frankly. I loved all of the discussions on, like, is it your fault if someone dies because of something you created, but you had absolutely nothing to do with that death, further than the fact that you created the thing that caused the falling out in the first place. I loved as well, like, all of these discussions on racism, the different types of racism, how black people are treated online, because these are things I never even thought of ever in my life, and so it was really important to me to have all of this in this book, because then I was finding out so much more. I learned so much from this book in that sense as well, and it was just an incredible read that I literally read it in 8 hours, which is not like me at all. It was just brilliant. It's so important. I highly recommend it if you are looking for a book that talks about like racism and things like this. This is definitely one to read. It was absolutely fantastic. Next book I'm mentioning is Middle Game by Shauna Maguire, because I've had this on my shelves for many years now, and I finally read it and I just devoured it. I didn't read it in a day because it's a chunker, but this was confusing but so good, because this one is following Roger and Dodger, and Roger is very good with words, Dodger is very good with numbers. They've been split up, they live on separate sides of the country in America. My camera battery is flashing at me. Give me 2 minutes to change my camera. And I'm back. Apologies if the camera angle was changed. I think it has. Give me a second. There we go. So anyway, as I was saying, Roger and Dodger. One is very good with language. The other one's really good with numbers. When they get together, they can do amazing things like rewind time, things like this. And they are just destined to destroy the world through alchemical means. It's a very confusing book. I spent most of it with a question mark over my head going, wait, what? Because it was very confusing and very, very complicated in places, but I say it's so worth it. I loved, like, these characters. I related to them so much. I was really, really invested from, like, the first page. I loved as well, like, all the different situations they ended up in and how, like, much danger they were in and what they were doing to save it, and sort of how these characters came together, then split apart, came together, split apart, all the rest of it. I loved all of it. Quite frankly, it was just amazing. I would say this has triggering content in it, so please be warned about that. Please look up trigger warnings. I've listed a few here, but I'm pretty sure I've missed some. But this was amazing. That's all I've got. This was amazing. Definitely recommend it. Just amazing. Cannot wait for Seasonal Fears, the sequel, to come out, and also to read Over the Woodward Wall, which is the book within this book that I've also got on my TBR for January. If I can grab it right here. But just, this cemented Shauna as one of my favourite authors. Just cemented it. So good. So good. I'm then also mentioning the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. I've only got The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and A Closed and Common Orbit. I've got 2 more on order from Waypoint, so they should be arriving soon. But these 2 were just brilliant. I don't do slow slice of life ever, and I don't read that much sci-fi either. I love sci-fi, but I don't read enough of it, quite frankly. That was one of my New Year's resolutions. I think I've nailed it. Well, I haven't nailed it, but I've done pretty well. But either way, I loved these books. I was really worried going into them because they're so hyped. I was thinking I wasn't going to like them. I found out that there was like romances in them and things like this, and I was like, probably not my thing. I literally finished The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and immediately bought this one off Waypoint as well. It was just absolutely brilliant. I loved, like, the exploration of, like, what makes you human. I loved exploring, like, all of these characters' pasts and things like this. It just reminded me of Star Trek. I always say this, but it reminds me of Star Trek in the sense that you've got this overarching plot line throughout the series, but each chapter is sort of like an episode of Star Trek in the sense that you're following like a different character and their storyline quite often. Like, yes, you are dealing with the team as a whole, but quite a few episodes focuses on, say, like Data or Picard or Riker or someone like that, essentially, Geordi and things like this. And each one of these chapters seemed to do that as well. And like, you had different chapters where you're focusing on different alien races, so like when you're learning more about the Klingons, things like this, and I loved that. I found Star Trek to be a huge comfort to me throughout 2020 and everything else, like Star Trek Next Generation. I have been watching the Chris Pine ones since Star Trek Into Darkness came out and Khan arrived on the screen, and I was all over that, quite frankly. And this just provided so much comfort. These are really, really comforting books to me, and I am so excited to continue this series because it is brilliant. And then the final book I'm mentioning is the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Now, I can only officially talk about the 5th season and the Obelisk Gate because I haven't read the Stone Sky yet. It is on January's TBR, so fingers crossed I'm going to get to it because this month is proving to be a bit of a mess, but we'll see what happens. It's one of my priorities, so I should hopefully get to it, fingers crossed. But this, like, the first 2 books were incredible. I was really, really worried going into them because I did not like the 100,000 Kingdoms. I DNF'd the 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. So I was looking at this one going, probably not going to like this, but I really want to give it a go. And I am so glad I did, because this one is sort of like a post-apocalyptic thing where basically the world is ending because a 5th season has come and generally people don't survive them. And we're following 3 different characters. All of them are origins, who are people who can steal the earth or create earthquakes, things like this. And one is going straight to the fulcrum where the origins are taught. Another one is basically like gaining up the ranks and has had to go out with one of the higher ranks to like try and help one town. And then you're following another one who has escaped all of that, gone on, had a child, 2 children, and one of her children has now died and she's trying to get the other one. And it was incredible. The plot twists were amazing. I admittedly called one of them, but that's only because I've seen a certain TV show, and I can't tell you what TV show it is because then you'll probably guess what the plot twist is. But I loved all the plot twists in these, even the one I guessed. It made me feel like a genius. I love the world building of this, the origins and the way everybody treats the origins because they're scared of them. Really reminded me of The Witcher, which was amazing because I am obsessed with The Witcher right now. Because the new TV series came out, so I'm just all about Geralt of Rivia right now. So that was really, really good. The second book also had characters who reminded me of the Weeping Angels, which, again, Doctor Who nerd loving heart loved, quite frankly. All of this kind of stuff just made me absolutely adore this series, quite frankly. I'm so excited to read the next one. And then the final thing I have to mention is the comics. Now, I'm going to go through the Kindle ones first, because obviously there are some Kindle ones I've got to mention. The first one is Vision by Tom King. I read this right at the beginning of the month. Well, right at the beginning of the year, I mean, when WandaVision was airing. And this one was so dark. I wasn't expecting how dark it was, quite frankly, because this is following Vision and his robot wife and his robot children as they try to live in normal suburbia and what goes wrong. And it just goes horrendously wrong right from the off. And you just get this deep sense of foreboding that just builds and builds and builds and builds throughout this graphic novel. And it was just incredible. If you are a fan of WandaVision, go read this, because you will see so many references to this comic throughout WandaVision. It was incredible. It's absolute brilliance, quite frankly. This was brilliant. I'm then mentioning Sam Wilson, Captain America. Now, this one was another one that I read around the time of Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming out. And again, I really, really, really wish I had vlogged it, because I'm an idiot and I didn't. And it wasn't until Loki came out that I suddenly went, I should vlog this. So we completely missed Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision. But this series, to get back to the point, was amazing. This series just focuses on Sam being Captain America, quite frankly, and it just works so well, because this series is literally focusing on basically the same things Sam is dealing with in the TV show. In the sense that you've got a whole lot of people turning around saying, Sam Wilson is not my Captain America, he's a black man. And you've got all of this discussion of like racism and how people are treating him because he's black and because he's Captain America, and how people are saying that they'd much rather have John Walker, who is a disgraced white soldier, or the Winter Soldier, aka Bucky, aka the Hydra brainwashed assassin who killed multiple people, including JFK in the comics. They'd much rather him. And I get it with Bucky, because Bucky is actually a good man, but it's just the fact that they were saying that basically they would have much rather have an ex-brainwashed Hydra assassin who is essentially a brainwashed assassin who essentially worked for Nazis than a black man. And it was such an interesting look into like racism and all of this kind of stuff. You've got a lot of like Trump-esque policies. This was actually written, I'm pretty sure, around the time of the Trump presidency, and you can really, really tell. So that was very, very interesting. My only thing is that I do wish this had been written by a black man, because this was actually written by a white man. And while I can tell that the author, whose name I've completely forgotten, did a very, very good job at like researching all of this and doing a reasonably nuanced look at racism and everything else, I do think it would have been done better by a black man, just for that, not to use own voices here, but basically their own voices experience in this. Apart from that though, it was genius and I loved it. Onto the physical stuff now. First thing I'm mentioning is ShangChi Brothers and Sisters, and this one is focusing on basically what has happened now that an evil society's leader Zheng Zhu has died, and now ShangChi, who is the son of Zheng Zhu, is now basically the heir to the throne, and he doesn't want it. And this was brilliant, quite frankly. The artwork is fantastic throughout it. It was a great look at ShangChi as a character as well, and it was just only a really good introduction to the character. I would recommend, if you have seen ShangChi or you want to watch ShangChi and you are interested in his comics, this is a great place to start. I am so excited to read the sequel, which is out this month actually. I need to pre-order that, but this was absolutely brilliant. I loved it. I'm then also mentioning Strange Academy by Scotty Young Volume 2 Brightside, because of course I am, but this one is more like a series of one-shots than one great big complete story. These are some of the artwork in it as well. I really loved the artwork in it, especially Loki arguing with another mother. That was very funny, quite frankly, the Parents' Day. But this one was brilliant. I still loved it. I love that we're still, like, even though this is like one-shots, from the Academy and you still don't see that much of like the magic users of the Marvel comic universe, and it's focusing more on these new kids, you still get this sense that something is definitely wrong here, something is going on. I love that. I just generally really loved it, and I cannot wait for the next one to come out. Then the final Marvel comic I'm mentioning is Falcon and the Winter Soldier by Derek Landy. Now obviously this is the second time Derek Landy has turned up on this list, but I couldn't help it. I love Derek Landy's writing, and this is no different, quite frankly. The artwork is brilliant as well, but seeing Sam and Bucky team up together was just fun. I love a Sam and Bucky team up. Obviously, this was just genius. I loved it. Then the final two things I have to mention is Something is Killing the Children. This one is a horror graphic novel about a monster that is killing children, essentially, and you've got a main character called Erica Slaughter who has come along to try and stop him. The artwork is gory. I'm trying to show you a nice page, quite frankly, but this was absolutely fantastic, and I'm so excited to read the next two in the series. And then the final thing I'm mentioning is Extraordinary by V.E. Schwab. This is set in between Vicious and Vengeful, and it's focusing on Charlotte, who can see other people's deaths when she looks into reflective surfaces. And then one day she looks into this reflective surface and sees Eli. And Eli is going to try and kill her, so now she's trying to stop him, essentially. This was so good. I love the flashbacks to Victor and Eli in the first book. I loved like how they tried to deal with him. The short story at the end was also really good. My only thing is that the art style was not my favourite, essentially. Apart from that, everything else was absolutely brilliant. And that is actually the end of my best books for 2021. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up. Comment down below, tell me what you have on your list. I'd love to know. Or if you don't have that much time, leave me a book related emoji down below to let me know that you were here. And also leave a link down below to all my social media if you want to check it out, including to the Comic Book Sanctum, which is my website dedicated to Marvel Comics, which has got stuff on all of the comics I've just mentioned that are Marvel comics, along with a whole load of other stuff. Or if books are more your thing, I'll also leave a link down below to my Redbubble and my Etsy store, which are bookish merch and bookish bullet journal stuff if you are interested. Or if you just want to see any more of my videos, please click subscribe here, and over here will be the link to my previous video. But until next time everyone, bye!